I call the July meeting of Paulding County Airport Authority to order. I'll note that Mr. Thompson and Mr. Aston have been excused prior to the meeting. Welcome our guests today, and if you will, Al will lead us in our invocation. If you're able to stand up, please. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, and thank you for all the many blessings you've placed upon us, dear Father. We thank you for the opportunity to gather and to govern in a free land. We've celebrated Independence Day, and we thank you, Father, for our freedoms. We especially thank you for those men and women who stand in harm's way to protect those freedoms. We ask that you be with our President, our Congress, our state and local leaders, dear Father, that have wisdom to make decisions that are in accord with your will and right for our people. Thank you for the gift of salvation through your Son, Jesus Christ, and for all your other many blessings. In your name I pray. Amen. All right, first item of business will be the approval of minutes of May 20th, 2015 meeting. You received a copy of those. Anybody note any errors or omissions?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of May 20th.
Have a motion by Ms. Wright. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mayor Debbie. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Passes unanimously. FBO report.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Month of June, we averaged 2.1 transactions per day, 116 takeoffs, 119 landings, 144 touch and goes, and 31 visitors to the FBO. These numbers are significantly down from 2014. Still holding a 5-star rating on AirNav with one new comment. The military's gone training on the West Coast, so they're looking to ramp back up with us here in August with a couple operations. Currently working on being put on the DLA list, which if you're not familiar, it's a Defense Logistics Agency list. What that'll entitle us to do is it goes out to bid to the Atlanta market. We bid on that and we become the one-stop fuel shop for all military vehicles that are capable of landing at an airport in the Atlanta area. So in transit from, say, Louisiana to New Jersey, they need fuel, they'll stop at our airport. And that, being put on that list, it's you bid on it, low bidder gets the deal, and then they all fuel with you. That's something we're currently working on. That list only becomes available once every 4 or 5 years. It's not due up until next year, so we're still a year out from it, but we're preparing as if we are. Paulding Jet Center has a new high school intern working with us for the summer. Jared Norton, if you would stand up. Jared is a Hiram senior, has been in the JROTC for going on 4 years. He is learning the ins and outs of the FBO and being around aircraft. He is looking to join either the Navy or the Air Force and aspires to be a pilot or a mechanic. Jared will also be doing work release through JROTC with us this school year. He is a bright, respectful young man and will succeed in whatever he chooses to do. We are happy to report that since the last meeting, all T hangars are currently full for the first time since the tornado. We have no vacant hangars, and we are now establishing a waiting list. We have 4 aircraft on a waiting list to come to our T hangars. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions of FBO? All right. Next thing, we'll move the airport director's report. Mr. Swafford.
First thing that we have on the director's report is the wildlife concerns. This has been on here, I guess, for, I don't know, maybe 4, 5, 6 months now. And I wanted to go into a little bit more detail this morning about the issue of the wildlife. There have been questions asked about, you know, why is this an issue now? Why is this coming up now? This type of thing. So I wanted to give some background and give what I think hopefully will be a little bit insight into why we have such a problem. We started construction on the airport in 2006, and we opened the runway and taxiway in the apron in 2008. We opened up the fuel farm, the terminal building, and the first set of hangars in 2010. We finished up the ramp expansion in 2011. So from 2006 until 2011, we had constant construction going on 5 to 6 days a week, just about from daylight to dark. During that 5-year time frame, we probably didn't see 5 deer on the airport during that 5-year period. And I think that was due to the fact that there was so much heavy construction equipment out there. The equipment's loud, board, I'm sure would be glad to tell you about the backup beepers on the equipment every time they back up and they go beep, 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 beep. It's loud and it was disruptive, and of course we cleared a massive area in order to construct the airport. We cleared over 300 acres in order to construct the airport. So we didn't have any deer activity at all on the airfield during that time frame, and when things got going in 2012, 2013, we really didn't have much deer activity either. And I think it was due to two things: all the construction that had taken place and the constant movement of construction equipment on the airport, and also because we had cleared that massive area around the airport, so there was no vegetation really, other than what little bit of grass we had been able to get to grow during that time frame. Since then, what has happened is we really haven't had hardly any construction at all since 2011. And we had that little bit of taxiway widening, which didn't take very long to do. We had a small safety area expansion, which didn't take long to do. So we haven't had a lot of activity on the airport. So I think the wildlife, especially the deer, have gotten comfortable or accustomed or used to the airport at this point. Also, what's happened is the vegetation has grown back up around the airfield. So when we constructed the airport, in order to build the runways and taxiways and aprons, we had to clear an area that was two to three times the size of those areas that we were constructing, because you had all the slopes. We had 120-foot fill areas, we had 65-foot cut areas. So in order to get all those slopes in and build all that up, we had to clear a much larger area than what you actually physically needed for the runways and taxiways and apron. Well, all of those areas around the airfield where those slopes are at and everything are now grown back up, and they're covered in vegetation. So you've got pine trees and saplings and other vegetation that's grown up all over those slopes, and it's now 5, 6, 7, 8 feet tall. So there's a lot of vegetation around the airfield. So 3 or 4 years ago, a deer would have had to have walked across a completely open area for a distance of 400 to 500 feet in order to get on the airport. Now that's not the case. Now they can walk through a wooded, or at least a covered area right up to the airfield. So where I said we probably didn't see 5 deer on the airport from 2006 to 2011, in the last 30 days we've had 20 deer that have been reported on the airport in the last 30 days. So that's almost one a day. So the deer activity has ramped up tremendously, and it is becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger problem. They've become more comfortable with the airfield. There's more vegetation, more cover, and they're just making themselves at home on the airfield. So I wanted to explain that in some more detail today, because I've been asked probably a half dozen times as to why is this a problem now where it wasn't a problem 5 years ago. So those are the reasons. And again, we had the report that was done by USDA, which talks about that. It talks about the vegetation, and it talks about the vicinity to everything. So,
Blake, what's the solution?
well, I think ultimately the long-term solution is a wildlife fence. Short-term solution is we try to remove some of the vegetation around the airfield that they're attracted to, and we also try to harass the deer, for lack of a better word. So whenever we see deer out there, we have the little I call it our fireworks gun. It's it's a little gun that just shoots off. It doesn't shoot a bullet of any kind. It just shoots off a noise maker. It's a firework, really, pyrotechnic. And we just try to harass them and make it so that they don't want to come onto the airfield, because they think they're going to get harassed when they come onto the airfield. Obviously, we also can go to the state and get a permit to have them shot. We've kind of sort of not done that during hunting season. We've allowed some folks to come on and do that, but in the off season we've not. But if we can't get it under control, we don't have any choice other than to do that. But those are kind of the
How high of a fence would it have to be?
typical wildlife fences for this purpose is 10 feet tall. So it's a big fence. It's not like a security fence. It's not like what you see next to the terminal building. This is more like what you see next to the interstate when you get into rural areas of the interstate, and they're typically made out of I call it hog wire. I don't know what other folks refer to it as, but it's the wire that has the big like 6 inch by 6 inch squares in it. Because we're not concerned about something climbing through the fence. And we're concerned about deer and other critters that really are going to jump over it is how they're going to try to get around it. So.
All right. Any other question about the wildlife? EA update.
Really haven't had much of an update lately on the EA, but I did want to go ahead and let you know that the first 2 chapters of the
You may
EA
want to state for the record that's environmental assessment.
environmental assessment. The first 2 chapters of the environmental assessment have been submitted to the FAA. The FAA has reviewed those first 2 chapters and they've sent them back with comments. So we're now addressing the comments in those first 2 chapters, and we'll resubmit those within the next couple of weeks. So we're now finally in the formal process of submitting documentation to the FAA. So it is a long process. We still have a long ways to go, but we are now completely engaged with the FAA on the submittals and review process on the chapters of environmental assessment. So progress is being made. It's just slow, and unfortunately, we've been told by the FAA that there's 1,000 eyes on this, and when there's 1,000 eyes, that means every I has to be dotted twice and every T has to be crossed twice. So that's the methodology that we're using for this, and hopefully, still would hope to have it done by the end of the year, first part of 2016. But the schedule will be dictated more by the environmental agencies than it is by us. So we'll continue to keep you updated. Once we have those chapters signed off on by the FAA, then we'll be able to distribute those and let folks take a look at them and have comments on them. So that's where we're at on EA. Any questions on that? All right. Moving on to honeybees. I know y'all would all be excited to see honeybees on the agenda, but I just want to let you know we had Sam Elrod came to us several months ago and said, what do you think about the idea of having honeybees on the airport? And I said, well, I honestly don't have any thoughts about having honeybees in the airport. Never thought about it. But he gave me an article that was from, seems like it may have been from the Atlanta Business Chronicle or some other document like that, about a green initiative that was being taken by an airport. Seems like it may have been up in Illinois somewhere. And part of their green initiative was they were putting honeybees on the airport. So he thought it was a neat idea, and I thought it was a neat idea, so he came out and stuck some honeybees on the airport. So within a couple of weeks, maybe a month or so after Sam put his honeybees out there, I got another call from Mr. Greg Steele with Steele Construction, who's a tenant on the airport, and said, I noticed some honeybees over there. And I said, yeah, and he said, you got any problem with me putting some honeybees out on the airport? So now Greg has put some honeybees out on the airport. So I guess at this point, we're a honeybee manufacturer, so if you know anybody who's interested or wants to put honeybees out on the airport, we're open and receptive to that.
That could be a cash cow, silver common honey.
Silver common honey?
Yeah.
So maybe we'll put that on our budget for 2016, honey revenues. But it seems to be working well. The honeybees certainly aren't bothering anybody. We don't see them around the building very much other than those trees in the parking lot. They seem to like the trees in the parking lot. So I think Jessica's come running into the building a couple of times with the honeybees chasing her. But other than that, hasn't been an issue. And I guess we're happy to have honeybees. Any thoughts or
How many
questions?
hives are out there?
I believe there are 4 out there now. Yeah. There are a couple of sets west of the T hangars, and then there's a couple of sets on the south side of the runway. So plenty more room if anybody wants to get into the honeybee business.
All right, budget review.
All righty, we do this every year, and this is simply our. We do this every year. This is simply the overview of the FY15 budget, and the columns that we have here. The first column is the actual revenues, actual expenditures. The second column is what we budgeted. Third column is the amount over or under budget, and the fourth column is the percent over or under budget. This budget is quite a bit different than what we've seen in the past because this budget is a combined budget. So if you recall, back in July, August of last year, we approved the airport Authority budget, the same as we always do. Then in October, well, let me back up. Then in August, the county approved their budget, the county's budget, which included the airport department's budget. And then in October, the airport department was shut down, and the airport authority took over all the operation. And in that process, the airport authority also took over the remaining budget from the airport department. So what we have here is a combined budget. So we approved the airport department budget, and we approved the airport authority budget, and this is a combination of the two. So if you go back and pull out your previous budgets, you'd have to take the two and put them together in order to come up with this one, but I've done it for you so you wouldn't have to. So starting up with the incomes, I'm not going to go line by line because it just takes too long, and I don't think it's necessary, but certainly if you have a question on something specific, be glad to address it. But looking at the incomes, airport rental was up a little bit, fuel flowage was down a little bit. I wanted to explain that fuel flowage just real quickly. Two things going into the fuel flowage number being down. One just simply has to do with the timing of the delivery of the fuel. For example, we had a delivery of fuel on July 7th, so that delivery came 7 days after the end of the fiscal year. Most of that fuel was sold during FY15, but those revenues won't come in terms of fuel flowage fee until FY16. So there's just a little flux in the way these dollars come in, because they come in whenever the fuel is delivered, not when fuel is sold. So it creates a little bit of flux there. Also, the fuel sales were down a little bit from FY14 to FY15. So we had projected a little bit of an increase in fuel sales, but unfortunately we didn't get that. So the government funding is the funding from the county. That's the funding that was approved in the county's FY16 or FY15 budget. Ground leases right about where they should be. The house rental income is down a little bit. That's the house off Clark Creek Path, 319 Clark Creek Path. And if you'll recall, we did have a change in tenants in FY15. And when we had one tenant that left the house, we had some maintenance and some work that we needed to do on the house. So we did all that work prior to the new tenant coming in. So we had about 6 weeks where the house was not occupied. So we had about 6 weeks where we didn't draw any rent from just from the time period in between one tenant leaving and the other tenant coming in. So this projection of 13.5 was based on it being occupied year-round, 12 months. Because we did have a 12-month lease at that time, so that's one of the reasons we projected it that way. But you all recall we did let the tenant out of the lease, so therefore we ended up with a little bit of vacancy. The IBA funding is the same as it's been for the last several years. And tie downs, we ended up not doing any tie down fees this year. We had projected that we might be doing that, but we did not do that. So you can see the revenues at 455. Are just over 1% down from what was projected in the budget. So I think if you can project a budget within 1%, you're doing pretty good, actually. On the expenses, a couple of things that I'll touch on here real quick. The airfield maintenance. Airfield maintenance costs were way, way, way above what was projected. That was primarily due to the 2 lightning strikes that we had in 2015. We had the one lightning strike that hit the runway. We had the other lightning strike that hit some of the electrical equipment on the airfield. So when we projected maintenance, we just projected maintenance. We didn't project the airfield getting hit by lightning twice. Don't really think that's something we can project. So that number is significantly higher than what we budgeted. However, you'll see on page 2 that we did get some insurance money on that. So the insurance money did offset some of this cost on the lightning. Looking down, just a couple of items below that, at least employee. Wanted to explain that real quick. You all recall that when Yolanda came on board with us in November, she was working for the EDO. However, her work arrangement was through a contract with the chamber. When we took a look at what we could do and what it would cost us to provide benefits to Yolanda, through the airport authority, we realized very, very quickly that it was going to cost us a whole lot more money in order to provide her with benefits through the airport authority than what she already had set up with the chamber. So instead of making her change insurance companies and change life insurance and change everything else, we decided to keep the same arrangement that the EDO had and simply do the contract with the chamber to provide her employment services to the airport authority. So instead of her salary being under payroll and being under employee benefits, it's under leased employee. We will probably change that in the FY16 budget to make it simpler to follow. Because as you can see here under employee benefits, we had budgeted $35,000 and we're only at 19. Down toward the bottom of the page, under payroll, we had budgeted $147.9 and we came in at $131. The reason is because this $29,000 needs to go, technically it needs to go into those, or that's where it would have gone. It would have gone into those other two line items. So this $29,000, that portion of it which is salary would have gone into payroll, and that portion which is fringe benefits would have gone into employee benefits. So it looks like we're way under on employee benefits and payroll, but it is offset by that leased employee which was not budgeted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'd like to make a point that there are no
Yes.
fees attached to Yolanda being on our payroll.
Yeah, and it's a massive savings for the airport authority to do it this way. Because we did go out, as you'll recall, we went to 3 different companies and got pricing on what it would require, what it would take to get benefits set up, to provide health care, dental, life insurance, and all that kind of stuff. And it was going to be a large increase for us to do it that way. So this way is a tad bit more confusing in terms of the accounting, but it's a whole lot better for us, and it works out better for Yolanda, again, not having to change all of her doctors and dentists and all that kind of great stuff. So. Okay, moving on down, we were over on some line items this year, such as website and internet, and most of that was because of the one-time expenses that were associated with starting up the airport authority as the operator of the airport. And what I mean by that is, prior to October of last year, Junie and I, of course, were on the county's payroll. Our email went through the county server. Our phones went through the county's phone network. So when we switched everything over to the airport authority, we had to go out and get phone service, which meant that we had to turn our phones back into the county and get new phones. We had to go out and set up email, so we had to get service for email. We had to get Jason Summerhour helped us with that, as you might recall. We had to get the service set up with Rackspace so that we would have a place to house our data and house our emails and all that kind of stuff. So there were a lot of one-time fees that are included in this budget that we won't see in FY16, but they were generated by the fact that we had a lot of startup costs with the employees coming over to the airport authority from the county. Does that make sense? All right, moving on down here. The last thing I'm going to touch on is the professional fees. You can see about midway through the page, a little below midway, we've got accounting fees came in pretty close to where they were expected. Engineering fees came in higher than they were expected. That was due to, of course, the EA and things like that. The legal fees actually came in a little bit less than what we had budgeted, so we need to pat Tom on the back and thank him for doing a good job with keeping our legal fees down, because obviously we've had a lot of legal issues in the last year, and for him to be able to handle those for the amount that he has is pretty remarkable. I'd be frightened to see what other folks have spent on legal fees. Flipping over to page 2, well, hold on for just a second. Down at the bottom here, you'll see that the net ordinary income on the budget was expected to be around $2,000, and on the actual it is minus $25,000. Again, I want to remind you that that's primarily due to 2 things. It's primarily due to the damage on the airport from the lightning strikes, and it's due to those startup costs that we couldn't have anticipated when we approved the budget in July of last year. So there's no way that could have been budgeted at the time. But if you flip over to page 2, what you'll see is there were some offsetting revenues to that deficit. We had $5,000 in insurance, we had about $500 in open records request fees, And the $17,000 here is reimbursement from Silver Comet under the agreement we had with them for them to pay for a part of the engineering that was done on some of our projects. So that was funds that were reimbursed to us from Silver Comet from some of that engineering work. So once you take these other incomes into account, our net deficit for FY15 was a little bit over $2,000. I think given everything that we went through in 2015, that was phenomenal that we came out with a net deficit of just $2,000. That money, of course, came out of what little bit of rainy day fund we had left over from 2014. So we are operating, I think, pretty much dead on the budget, and feel pretty good about where we're at as far as that's concerned. Any questions? I know that's a lot of material to cover, and if you have questions tomorrow, next week, next month, give me a call or an email at any time, because I realize it's a lot of attachments.
All right, next item is the approval of the ACCG IRMA insurance renewal.
Okay, we have our annual renewal from ACCG on our insurance, and the cost this year is $8,207 for our renewal on our insurance. Two things that I want to say. One is with the lightning strikes that we had last year, I'm a person who always cringes whenever I pay my insurance because it seems like I never need it, but I always have to pay it. But with the lightning strikes that we had last year, actually we beat up on the insurance company last year, so we did well, I guess if you want to call it that, with our insurance coverage last year. The second thing that I want to say is there are a whole lot of areas where I feel like I have some expertise in terms of airport operations and engineering and that type of stuff. Insurance is not one of them. So if one of you feels like you have a good background and a good handle on insurance, I would really love to have another set of eyes on this document if somebody's willing to take a look at it, just kind of run through it. You can see it's not a huge document, and most of this is legalese, so it won't take a ton of time, I don't think, for somebody to take a look at it. But I really would like to have somebody else who maybe has more experience and more background with insurance to just take a look at this. And when we get to the IBA meeting later, same thing, we've got a renewal on the IBA as well, so if somebody's willing to do that.
I'll do that, but it's also important to note that ACCG and the Interlocal Risk Management Association are government-owned and funded entities. The counties have IRMA and the cities have GIRMA, and they combine together, so they act pretty much like a mutual insurance company for their member cities and counties. So you get a very good deal. The boards are operated by members from the member governments, and so you're always going to get probably a better deal and a wider range of coverage. But I will flip through it and see. I think that you can rest assured you probably got the broadest coverage available.
Yeah,
And the other thing IRMA does is provides the helpline for personnel issues and first notice of claim on liability issues that you would have to pay somebody for that legal advice if you have those needs arise.
right. I think we probably get a really, really great deal through IRMA as far as the cost is concerned. The thing that I would like another set of eyes on more so than the cost is our coverage, to make sure that we are adequately covered, that we have what we feel like we need. You know, we've had conversations with IRMA every year when we do the renewals, but again, insurance is not my area of expertise, so just have another set of eyeballs on our things are really good. Thank you, I appreciate you volunteering.
All right, we have a need for a closed session for personnel and litigation purposes.
Chairman,
Sorry,
1 second. I just noticed something.
we did not vote on the ACCG or IRMA thing, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the renewal.
So moved.
Approved.
Have a motion by Chairman Austin. Is that a second?
Yes.
Mayor Diddy. Any discussion? All
Approval
those-
after you've looked over the
Yeah.
document.
Subject approval. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Before you ask for a motion, I just noticed a mistake on the minutes. Commissioner Potter's name's on there twice for 2 different names.
All right, okay.
South of Yolanda.
Just a typo.
Typo.
All right. Is there a motion to enter closed session for personnel and litigation purposes? Have a motion by Mr. Shipp. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Pavelli. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Motion to re-enter the regular session.
I make a motion.
Have a motion by Ms. Biggs. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Wright. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Motion carries unanimously. And is there any other business to be brought before the airport authority at this time? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Have a motion by Mr. Shipp and second by Chairman Austin. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned.